I'm not hearing you
Peter, can you hear
completely
us?
well. I don't know if you need to be a little closer to your microphone, maybe.
Or is it okay? Is it better now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
And yeah, I really thank you for being with us, being so early in the morning there. Still, you have made a time for us, and it's really a privilege for us to to have you with us. And we are all eagerly waiting. Most of us here are like unschooling, homeschooling families or open learning families. So I'll just say good evening to others.
Good.
So everybody, we have Peter here. I don't need to introduce you to Peter as in Peter. We all know with the kind of posts that we have been sending for last couple of weeks. His body of work, his area of research, his thoughts, his opinions. We have gone through a lot, and Peter, we have been working on this for last 2 weeks, and we have brainstormed on many things, and then eventually we are here. So I would just like to say, everybody, I would not talk on that aspect, but I would just say how kind and committed you are to the cause, that is self-directed learning or open learning. That I just connected with Peter about in the last week of July, and I just wrote a mail. In fact, I didn't even know the right email ID, and I just wrote to him, and I was wondering if it could ever reach him, and luckily it reached you. And in within like 3-4 days he agreed, okay, I can join, and 12th August is the date. Let's freeze the date. And uh, it's really wonderful to have you here. So Peter, what we have is we have panel here of young learners. So we thought we'll make it a bit different this time. Usually it is the adults or the parents asking questions, but we thought, why not young learners gain something from you and from your experience and your wisdom. So we have that panel here. And just to talk a bit about the flow, uh, what we'll do is first 1 hour, these uh, young children will take the questions or ask their questions to you, and some of the questions that we have already collated. And later we'll open the floor for the audience to probably even, ask their questions. So that will be the flow. I hope that is okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hand it over to Dhrupad in the panel now.
Hi,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Yeah, so good evening, everyone, and good morning, Peter. Uncle, is that okay if we address you as uncle?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my name is Dhrupad. I'm 18, and I've been an open learner all my life. And I benefited from it because it gives me, like, I can structure my own learning and figure out wherever I want to work on. And right now, I'm exploring the field of digital marketing. Yeah, so just to share a little about the audience. So this meetup, we have families that are who are already doing open schooling and unschooling, and we have some new people that are like they're learning for the first time, so they want to learn from you and from just get to know about the whole concept. And in the audience as well, we have people from Aarohi community, which is like an open learning community for people of all ages. And like families in the community create a space for people to co-create, co-support, and co-learn as a community. So yeah, and the panel interviewing you today are some of the people are from the community, and the teenagers over here are from Coversity, which is the journey from Aarohi Open Learning, which is for like people aged 13 to 21 years old. And it's a journey that people can lead their professional journey like by discovering their interests and deep diving in their chosen domains. So yeah, and we learn from real industry work while interacting with clients and experts in our domains to develop expertise within our domain. Yeah, and I'll start off with the first question, which is what are your opinions on children taking the path of designing their own professional journey through real life experience?
So, well, first of all, it's an honor to me to meet you all and to hear a little bit about your community. It's a wonderful thing from my perspective what you're doing. Of course, I think that it's who else should take charge of a person's life other than that person, right? I mean, you have to be the person who makes decisions, big decisions for yourself. Of course, everybody wants to take into account the people that they love and who love them. You want to respect people who are part of your family, but ultimately, of course, you have to take charge of your own life. And there's a lot of research that shows that people are happier, they're more productive, when they are doing things that they've decided that they want to do, as opposed to doing things that they feel obliged to do, or that they feel that they're doing in order to please somebody else, rather than because this is really a meaningful thing for themselves to do. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but definitely I think that it's extremely important for young people to choose their own career orientations, to take the initiative to figure out how to pursue those career orientations, something that sounds like you are very much doing yourself.
Yeah, that answers my question. So I will pass it on to Misti next.
Hello, Peter uncle. I'm Mishti. I'm 10 years old, and I have been so excited for this meet, like so excited. I have been open learning since 3 years, and honestly, I love how you can, there is no control over your life, and it's like whatever you are doing, you're planning it by yourself your entire day. You have basically thought it out by yourself. And I love reading, I love writing, I love music, and there's an Indian sport which is called Malkham. I'm very much into that. So with that, I will ask you my first question, which is that, many times when you're an open learner, you get these questions where people are asking you about your career and your future life, because I don't have any degree, unless I want to do an iOS or something like that. I don't have any current degree and I don't have any studies. So what is your thought on my future career?
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? I missed something there. I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
So let's say I want to become a musician in my future. Whenever I grow, I feel comfortable, old enough at that time. So sometimes people are little concerned that you don't have a study life and you don't have a proper degree. So how can you be sure of your career? And what's your opinion on that? Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yes. Well, I think it is important for each person to kind of figure out, at least as you get a little bit older, to kind of figure out what it is, how you're going to do what it is you want to do. Of course, there's a lot of differences among individuals, and we need to respect these individuals. Some people have very clear career orientations. At some point, they really discover what they want to do. They're passionate about it. My research into grown unschoolers and people who have grown up in democratic schooling shows that there are some people who develop fairly early on really passionate interests, and they know what they want to do and they figure out what they want to do. But then there's many other people for whom that's not so clear, and that's okay too. And so some people go on, and it's not, somebody asks you, well, what do you want to do for your career? And not everybody really knows. Some people say, well, I might try this or I might try that. And I think that when you're into kind of what I call self-directed education, I think it's really important that we respect this whole range, that there are some people who are very passionate and it's very important to them to really excel in a particular career, but there are other people who kind of want to live a rounded life, and they want to do this and a little bit of that, and it's not absolutely so clear. So I think that it's important that people respect both of those attitudes. I'm not sure if this is exactly addressing to your question, but I think that that as you grow and as you think about your own future, that you not necessarily feel like you have to pin yourself on some particular direction, that it's okay to say, well, I might try this or I might try that. I'm not so sure about India. I've been to India a couple of times, but India much better than I do. But in the United States, it's very common that people are changing careers as they go along, and and I see that among grown unschoolers too. That sometimes it's not until you've been in some job or career for a period of time that you begin to think, well, maybe this isn't for me, or something else might be better. And so one of the things that I've seen for people who are self-directed, because they grew up self-directed, is that they're pretty good at changing their decisions when they feel a desire to change their decisions.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Sriya now.
Hello, Peter Uncle, and I'm Sriya. I'm 19 years old, and I'm passionate about designing. And I'm on my journey to make my passion into a profession. And I've been doing open learning from past 3 years. And something that I really enjoy or love about open learning is that I get to explore different ways of learning something, be it on anything. So that's something that I really love about open learning. So I would continue with my question. So sometimes when I get failure, I really get frustrated. I shout at people around me at times. So a lot of emotions go up and down here and there when I get a failure. But then later, when I think about it for a while, that's when I realize I've got some learning from it, and I got a new way of thinking. So what do you think about this failure? Do you think that it is a learning? Like, is it a learning?
So I'm sorry. So you're talking about if you become emotional about something, is this valuable learning? Maybe again you could rephrase the question, because I'm not totally sure I got every part of it.
So I'm particularly talking about failure. So what is your opinion on failure?
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. I'm missing that word. You're talking about
failure.
Video?
Failure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, got it now. Yeah, learning from failure. Yes, of course we learn from failure, right? Yes, and I think that this is something that's really, I think one of the problems with typical schooling is the whole idea of failure. That people fail, people get a bad grade, or they fail, and failing is therefore a bad thing. But of course, in real life, if you're at all adventurous, if you're at all oriented towards trying new things, if you're at all have the courage to try things that you're not necessarily all that great at the beginning, you're going to fail along the way. We also know that in this economy, where more and more people are kind of innovators, starting their own businesses, are entrepreneurs of one sort or another, that most of these businesses fail, at the beginning. And if you give up because you fail, or you think that I can't do anything because I failed at this, or I failed at that, or this business failed, then you're in for a very tough life. So I think that's one of the great advantages of self-directed education is that people grow up realizing, I can try this thing and it may work out or it may not work out, but that's okay. I have the courage to try it. When I write about play, one of the things that I often say about play is that play entails the freedom to fail, because when you're playing, nobody's evaluating you, nobody's judging you. You're just trying this out. And if we can all take a kind of playful approach to all of our life, then we feel like, it's every time you fail, it's not really failing. It's something that you tried and something that didn't work out, and maybe you'll try it again, or maybe you'll go on to something different as a result of that. So I think that's a very good question. It's a very insightful idea that failure is not failure. I mean, what we call failure is not really failure. It's like the scientists who, you do an experiment and it doesn't come out the way you wanted it to come out. The scientist says, well, this wasn't a failure. This was a learning experience. I learned that this doesn't work, so we'll try it this other way. We'll try something different. We'll try a different hypothesis.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, yes, we welcome failure. So I pass on to Aparna to continue with the question.
Hi, Peter Uncle. I'm Aparna and I'm 13 years old. And I've been doing open learning for the past 2 years. Something why I choose to do open learning is that I can design my day, which you have already told. I really like that point. So I would like to go to my first question. So as a teen, in this digital aged world, how can I find balance between my online interests as well as my offline activities or interests which I like to pursue?
Again, I'm going to ask you to repeat it. I'm having just a little bit of trouble understanding everything that's being said. So can you repeat the
Sure.
question again?
Yeah. So how do I find balance between my online interest as well as my offline interest in this digital aged world?
So balance between your own interests and the interests of other people. Is that what you're asking?
No, online interest and offline interest. Did you get me?
So I just am sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll repeat it again. So what I'm trying to ask you is, how can I find balance between my online interest as well as my offline interest? How can I find a balance
you're
between both?
online, between online interests and other offline interests. How
Yes.
find balance. Okay, got it. I have to apologize. I'm not very good. Your voices all sound beautiful to me, but the accent makes it a little difficult for me to understand everything that's being said, and I just apologize for that. So online. So yeah, this is in this day and age, this is a big question, is how to find that balance. And I think it's important that you've just figured that out yourself. There is some concern, of course. I know there is a lot of concern in this country that social media, that online communications, that this is very seductive in a way, that it's almost addictive to some people, that you've always got, if you've got a mobile phone, you've always kind of got access to it. There's always something calling your attention, and it's pretty easy to spend maybe more time on that, on the online interactions with people online, whether it's YouTube's you're looking at or whatever it is. It's easy to spend maybe more time doing that than you want to do. And so I think it's just like, I think the way to think of it is that in some sense, we all have to learn how to manage our time, how much time do you want to spend on online things that you want to do, and how much time do you want to spend on other kinds of things that you want to do? And to take kind of conscious control of that. And so if you feel like you're spending more time online than you really want to spend, you would really rather spend more time interacting in the real world, in the non-online world with other people, somehow working out a schedule, like, I'm going to be online between such and such time and such time, and other times I'm going to be offline. Sometimes within a family, the family will agree none of us are going to be online during meals or during certain times of the day, so we can all be present to each other and be present. I even know of a school for self-directed education, a learning center for self-directed education, where the children themselves in the school made a rule that there would be a couple of hours every day where nobody would be online. And the reason they made that rule is because some of the kids at the school like to play games outdoors, like to play sports outdoors, and they found it difficult to arrange. Even those people who wanted to play outdoors would say, well, I just need to finish this video game, or I'll come out as soon as I finish this thing online, and then they would not come out. And so just in order to find some time when nobody would be online and they would be available to play some game outside, they said, okay, so between this hour and this hour, we have a rule here of nobody being online. I thought that was a reasonable thing to do because the students themselves decided to do it. It wasn't imposed on them. I think that it's always, there's always a reaction against being limited by other people who've decided to limit. But if you decide to limit yourself, then you're still in control. You've made that decision to limit yourself. So I think it's every individual person's. I don't think there's any recipe for how much time online is healthy and how much time is not. It's a little bit like, even before we had the internet, before we had computers, there were some people who liked to read. And they would spend all their time reading. And I remember even as a kid, why did these people want to read all the time instead of coming outside to play with me? There always have been people who have different kinds of interests. We might call them nerds. In this country, the term nerd is sometimes used to refer to somebody who's not an outdoor person. They're kind of an indoor person. They read a lot, they do things online, and so on and so forth. And I think these are personality differences, and I think they're perfectly legitimate. We've had the internet long enough that I know there are some people who've spent a lot of time online as young people, and they've gone on to good lives. So there's nothing automatically bad about it. But I do think that each person needs to decide for themselves what's the right balance for you. If you're spending a lot of time online, what are you missing by not having more time offline, being with other people?
Sure. I guess that it has answered my question. And I have a follow-up question for you, Peter Uncle. So sometimes when we are in the gadgets, as in doing something with our interest, parents get too concerned, as in we are using the gadgets, overusing the gadgets. So how do we as a children navigate with their conflicts, as in how do we handle the situations?
Okay, again, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question and see if you can, just the essence of it. Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, sometimes parents get concerned that we are overusing the gadgets. So how do we figure out those conflicts?
Okay, sometimes parents get concerned about your use of technology. Is that what the question is? And how do you deal with that? Yes, well, when I talk to parents, I try to encourage them to have, if they're concerned about it, have a discussion. And I think that as a young person, have a discussion with your parents so that your parents so that the parents know what their child is doing online, so that the parents understand that the child is not doing crazy things online. There are some things that I think are important that young people should know about being online. You can, so for example, I think it's really important when you're online to act as if whatever you're doing online, this could potentially be available to everybody in the world. Do you want everybody in the world to see what you're showing and talking about online right now? Depending, of course, the way you're online. But if you're posting a video or if you're doing something like that, is this something that you would want some future employer to know about you or not? You're putting it out there in a public way. And so I think it's very important that young people recognize that and not do or say things online that potentially could then be spread virally or be available. If you're looking for a job or you're looking for admission to a select university or something, be aware that the people who are making the judgment about whether to accept you, they may be looking for any trace of what you've left online. So I think that's one thing that's very important. Another thing is not to be drawn into something. Like if somebody starts asking for money or something, or wants to meet you in some private place or something, be suspicious. So I think it's really important that young people understand certain precautions, and that I think parents for younger children, younger probably than any of you, that the parents talk with their children about safety online. So I think that's important. But I also think it's important for parents to recognize that being online is not wasted time. It's not generally harmful. This is the world we live in today. And I think that we people in the older generation are often distrustful of anything that's new. This has always been true, that whenever there's new innovations, whatever it is, young people are very much attracted to it and learn how to use it before the older people do, learn what the benefits of it are, and become skilled with it before older people do. And then older people feel like this must be really harmful. I didn't have this when I grew up, and so it must be harmful now to young people. And I think it's important for parents and the older generation generally to get over that feeling and to try to understand what the benefits are and why their young people are attracted to this.
Yeah, it was really nice to hear from you, as in get answers from you. Now I would like to pass on to Srijani to take up her stance.
Yeah. Hi, Peter Uncle. This is Srijani. And I am currently exploring baking, especially baking cakes. So, yeah, and I have been open learner, settled learner for about 3 years now. And something that I really love about being an open learner is that I can do in my own way. Like I can, at my own pace and in my own style, I can do stuff. So that's something I really love about open learning. And my question goes that, is there anything you would like to mention, that one thing which you feel that most of self-directed learners won't do and you feel is very important that they should do, and the other way around? which is one thing that people keep doing, like the self-directed learners, that you feel is not necessary or unproductive.
Okay, again, I'll ask you just to repeat the
Yes,
essence of the question so I'm sure that I understand it.
yes. So, what's that one thing that most of the self-directed learners do that you think is not necessary, and the other way around, where self-directed learners often do, which you don't need to do?
Okay, so
Should I rephrase it?
let's see if I've got the question. So you're asking, are there things that self-directed learners do that others don't do, or are you asking the reverse of that?
No, that self-directed learners do that you think is not necessary or
The
unproductive.
self-directed learners do that I think is not necessary.
Yes.
So I think that the judgment as to what's necessary or not ultimately lies with the learner. So what is necessary for you, for what you want to do, what you feel is necessary, may not be necessary for another person, right? So in the typical schools, we have the idea that there are certain things that everybody's supposed to do and everybody's supposed to learn. And I think that's part of the mistake of typical schools. That in fact, there are some things, of course, that everybody kind of needs to learn to have a good life, right? There's certain things that all of us kind of need to learn. What are those things? We all kind of need to learn how to get along well with other people. You know, you're not going to have a good life if you don't know how to get along with other people. We're all social beings. It's very important that we know how to get along with people, that we're not mean to other people, that we know how to deal with other people, we know how to compromise, we know how to make friends and keep friends. That's probably the most important human skill, right? And one thing about self-directed learning is you have lots of time to do that. You have lots of time to interact with other people. I think that's really important. More important for some people than for other people, but I think it's to some extent important for everybody. It's important that we know how to control our emotions to some degree, that we not get carried away with fear or anger. We need to learn how to regulate our emotions, or else our life is going to be somewhat difficult. In a literate society, it's probably important to know how to read and write, right? I mean, there's a handicap if you can't read and write. So it's generally important to learn how to read and write, but that's probably even less important than the other things that I've mentioned. There are people in our society who have good lives who don't read and write very well, perhaps because of some brain difference that makes it difficult for them to learn that. But for most of us, it's certainly valuable to do those things. Beyond these, and it's important to know how to use technology. We were just talking about technology. No matter what you're going to do in this world, you know, you need to be able to use the computer. Computers are everywhere. They're part of everything. There's no question about that. It's important. So beyond those certain kinds of things, what else is important? Does everybody really need to know how to do mathematics like calculus or trigonometry or even algebra? Does everybody really need to know that stuff? How many people actually use it in their real life? So I think that I think that somebody who feels like, oh, I've got to learn that stuff because that's what they teach in the typical school, I think that it would be a mistake to think you have to learn it because of that reason. So we have a world where there's so much knowledge, there's so many different things to know, there's so many different ways of being, that I think beyond certain basic things that is valuable for everybody to know, I think that then the choice really is just, what is it that you want to know? What are you curious about? And what is it that you want to do in life? and what is it that you need to do and learn to prepare yourself for what you want to do in life. Those are the ways to think about it. I don't think there should be any hard and fast rules about what it is you're supposed to do or you're supposed to learn beyond, just the basic things that you need to be a reasonable citizen in the culture that you're growing up in, to be comfortable in your own skin, to be comfortable with yourself, to be able to get along with your family and other people. These are important things, and then everything else has to do with what is it that you really want.
Yeah, thank you very much, Uncle. Yeah, that answered my question. And yeah, Dhrupad, you can go on.
Yeah. So hi again. I have another question. So in traditional schooling, there is often a focus on tests and exams to grade children. And so how does unschooling evaluate progress with without these traditional metrics?
So I think that evaluation has no place in education. Except to the degree that it's evaluation that the student themselves asks for and wants. Evaluation ruins education. And the reason it ruins education is because it presents to the student an artificial set of what it is you're supposed to learn. It tells you that your job is not to educate yourself, but your job is to pass these tests. And so you orient yourself towards passing tests, even if the stuff that you're learning is completely meaningless to you. It doesn't have any relevance to your own interests. When I write about self-directed education, or sometimes I'm asked to speak with government officials in countries where they're trying to decide whether unschooling should be allowed, or even homeschooling should be allowed, or whether democratic schools where there's no curriculum and no tests, no evaluation should be allowed. My response to their question about evaluation is that there's really only two ways of evaluating a system of education. The first way of evaluating is, are the students happy or not? If the students are not happy, then this system is failing. This is a bad system. Any system of education that makes students unhappy is wrong. One thing we know is that a happy childhood, a happy youth predicts a happy future. A miserable childhood, a miserable youth predicts a miserable future. And so the first criterion of any educational system is that it must be a system that is compatible with the students being happy. The second way of evaluating is what happens to the young adults who finish through this system. Are they continue to be happy? Do they find reasonable employment? Are they good citizens? Are they moral people? So you can't judge along the way. You can't judge by looking at steps along the way. Are they learning this or are they learning that? Ultimately, you have to trust. You have to trust that they're going to be okay in the long run. And if you don't trust that, if you're a government official and you don't trust that, then do studies. Do the kind of research that I've been doing in the United States now for many, many years, which shows that young people who are not being examined or not being graded or not being given some curriculum, but are really being allowed to learn what they want to learn in their own ways, to do what they want to do in their own ways, under conditions where there's plenty of opportunities for them to learn. That's important, that there be opportunities for them to learn, that whatever they want to learn, that studies that show they turn out well, they can go on even to higher education if that's what they want to do. They can go into any kind of careers. That's the evidence that it works. And I think we have to give up on the notion that testing along the way makes any sense. The only sense, the idea behind examinations is that people are all supposed to be learning the same thing, and we want to make sure that everybody's learning those things, and we want to evaluate people based on how well they're performing on tests of whatever it is that has been decided that they should be learning. But once you've made the decision that it's up to each individual to learn what they want, and that everybody's going to take different tracks, different people are going to learn different things, then testing doesn't make any sense anymore. The only kind of testing that makes sense is if, let's say, you have decided, I want to be a musician. I want to be a violin player, let's say, but it could be anything. It could be, I want to be a mathematician, or I want to be a writer. And you say, I want to have some people who are already good at this take a look at what I'm doing and give me their thoughts about it. This would be feedback to me. Am I playing the violin in some ways that's mistaken that I could learn from you? And that's a kind of testing. What do you think of my ability to solve this unknown equation, or this, to develop a new mathematical model of something? Can you find flaws in the way that I'm doing it? So getting that kind of feedback can be very, very valuable, but that's feedback that's valuable because you're asking for it rather than it being imposed upon you.
Yeah, that certainly answered a lot of the follow-up questions I had. So I will pass it on again to Misti for her second question.
Yes. So for me, one thing that happens to me a lot is that when I am pursuing something I like, then occasionally I find myself feel that I don't want to do this anymore, or not, I'm losing interest. I have interest, I just feel too lazy, or there's not enough activities or enough spark currently in that project or in that thing that I'm doing, which is leading me to step away from it for a while. So what do you suggest will keep active interest in anything?
Well, first of all, it's not necessarily a bad thing that when something gets less interesting to you for whatever reason, that you step away and do something else. I think there are, as I said before, I think there are differences between people. I think some people develop a passionate interest and they stay with that interest. Other people, you dabble in this for a while and then you dabble in that for a while, and that's perfectly legitimate. So I think that I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think it's sometimes we have the idea that everybody in self-directed education is going to develop some passionate interest that they're going to pursue at all costs, and they're going to just keep doing that, and they're going to become an expert at that. They'll become the world's expert at whatever it is they're doing. And I think sometimes those people get promoted. We like to talk about those people because they become famous maybe, or they become real experts. And then that becomes the evidence that self-directed education works. But I think it's a mistake to use that as the only kind of evidence. That's not the way everybody is. Many people they're less likely to develop a single line that they want to pursue regularly and passionately. they're interested in a lot of different things. So they do this for a while, and then that becomes less interesting. They do that for a while, and there are many people for whom that's a wonderful life, to go through life, pursuing different interests at different times. The only thing that's important here is that you figure out some way, one figures out some way, I need to make a living. I need to somehow make a living. And what is the way that I can make a living? So some people, their way of deciding what it is they want to make a living at is, I'm really passionate about this. I've spent my whole youth and my childhood pursuing this interest, and now how can I make a living doing whatever it is I'm really passionate about? But other people, it's a different kind of way of thinking. It's like, how can I make a living that I'm making enough money that I can survive and I can have a family and I can do the things that I want, but still gives me enough time to do other things that I'm interested in, because my interests change over time. I want to live a balanced life. I'm not the kind of person who wants to just devote my whole life to some particular pursuit. I want to live a balanced life and do sometimes doing this and sometimes doing that. And I think that those of us involved with self-directed education, and especially parents whose children are in it, educators who run such centers and so on, I think it's important to value that kind of pursuit just as much as you value the pursuit of people who have some passionate interest.
A sort of follow-up question on that. You said that now there are different people, and they need to understand how to make a living out of what they like. So according to you, what age is right or near ideal for working and earning, or is it no age? Your thoughts?
I'm sorry, say that last part again. What is so I've got the part that you're concerned about how people make a living, and then what?
What age is right to start working and earning?
Oh, what is the right time to start working and earning?
Yes.
I think that so much depends on so many circumstances, and it partly depends on, not everybody's family can support young people beyond a certain age. So in many cases, it's a necessity by a certain time to begin working. One thing that I find in the United States, in my studies of unschoolers and young people involved in democratic schools, is many of them do start working and earning even while they're teenagers, but they're not employed full time. They have part-time jobs, and oftentimes they're jobs in areas that interest them, but other times it's just jobs in order to be able to earn their own money. That's their own money that's not given to them by their parents, so they can spend it how they want to give as a sense of independence. And so, my son, began to work in a restaurant when he was 13 years old. When I was 13, this was many years ago in the United States, I had a job after school. I was going to regular school, but I had a job after school working at a printing company as a janitor, cleaning up after them and making deliveries. I was a delivery boy. And that was very useful to me. It was very valuable to me. It wasn't that was a career I was going to pursue as an adult, but it gave me a sense of, I can earn my own money. I can work out in the real world. I can be a responsible person holding a job. I think there's some real value in young people having a part-time job. You want to preserve plenty of time for your own educational goals, your own play and exploration, the things that you do that are developing you. But part of what you do might be work. There are also cases that I know of people who have passionate interests, who begin to make money in those interests while they're still very young. So in my research on a fairly recent study of grown unschoolers, I found that many of them, even before they were 20 years old, were already had some employment in areas that were areas of their passion interest. So there was one person who developed a real interest in photography, and he was already making money as a portrait photographer by the time he was 17 or 18 years old. And he had other interests in ultimately in flying, and he ultimately became aerial photographer, an aerial nature photographer. Another person who this was a person who was spending, we talked earlier about online activities. This is a person who was spending a lot of time online and was creating YouTubes, very well produced YouTube videos, and became very good at it. And when he was about 17 or 18, he discovered that a movie company was making a major movie in the city that he lived in, and he volunteered to help. And so at first he volunteered, but they found he was so helpful as an assistant producer that they hired him. And so by the time he was 18, he was already hired as an assistant producer, making a good salary. They invited him to go to Hollywood, where and he was well on his way by the age of 20 to his dream job of being a movie producer. So sometimes people can find employment even as young people in their areas of passion. So there's no general rule about it. There are some people who as long as your family is comfortable supporting you, and you want to spend more time exploring things and not really ready for employment, that's fine too. So I think that there's no hard and fast rule about it. But I do generally encourage young people to seek some kind of employment. It gives a sense of independence. It gives a sense, it helps to prove to yourself that you can get a job and you can keep a job, you can make money, and this is money that's your own money. Nobody can tell you how to spend it because you earned it yourself. So I think this is a healthy thing. It's in the United States, it's harder and harder for young people to get employment. There are more and more laws that say you can't hire somebody under a certain age. So, for example, that job that my son had when he was 13 and the job that I had when I was 13, no longer is it legal for companies to hire people that young for that kind of a job, which I think is a shame. I think it's valuable as long as it's not taking too much of your time. You still have plenty of time to play and explore and do other things. I think it's very valuable to have part-time employment.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Sriya, but this was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I am currently on my professional journey. And one of the major concern that my parents have is me not having a degree certificate. So I have a gut feeling that I don't need a degree certificate. But if someone asks me why, I can't give logical reasons to that. So how do I now tell my parents that they don't have to worry about me not having a degree certificate? Sometimes, yeah.
That's a really good question. So what I find in my research in the United States is that about half of the people in self-directed education go on for some kind of a degree. maybe a little bit more than half. They go on to get a degree from a community college, or they go on to a four-year college and get a bachelor's degree. And at least in the United States, it's not that difficult to do that. You don't necessarily have to have a high school diploma to go on and do that. The people who do that have some good reason for it, generally speaking. So let's say if you want to be a doctor, to be a doctor, you've got to go to medical school. And to get into medical school, you have to have, at least in the United States, you have to have a degree. You have to have a degree from a four-year liberal arts college. Or it's not necessarily illegal for the medical school to take somebody who doesn't have such a degree, but in practice, it just doesn't seem to occur. So somebody who wants to be a doctor says, well, I've got to get a bachelor's degree, and then I need to go on to medical school, and I need to figure out what it is I need to do in order to get the bachelor's degree, in order to go on into that, into higher education to do that. Somebody who's not oriented towards something that requires, for the career that requires that you do that, requires that you get some kind of an official degree in order to do it, then it's just really, does it make any sense in terms of your own desires to go on in that kind of way? If you're interested in the arts or crafts, or you're planning to start your own business, or and there's many other kinds of fields that really don't require any certificate, don't require that you have some kind of formal training and certificate goes with that training, then there's no need for it. So I think that the answer to your question depends upon your you're thinking about what it is you want to do in your life, talking with your parents about what you want to do in your life, and then showing that you have done the research that looks into what do you need to do to prepare yourself for what you want to do in life. And if what you need to do to prepare yourself doesn't require any kind of certificate, then explain that. Now, they'll either understand it or not understand it, but let's hope that they do understand that.
Yeah, thank you. Aparna will continue.
Yeah. So I have a question now. So I do different projects, different activities, which I document and make a portfolio in which I see the process, my learnings, the outcomes, and different learnings or different things which I have done in that project, which I got out of it. But how do I showcase to others me as a person, as a professional? How can others know me? Because in portfolio, I show my learnings rather than my doings, as in what I can do as a person, as an individual. So how do I do that?
So how do you show other people that you're learning or what you're learning? Is that the question?
No. My question is, how can I showcase myself as a person, as a professional? Because I decide how should I do things, how can I develop myself? But how do I showcase it to others? How can I prove myself that I can be a good leader? If somebody is recruiting me, they need to know me as a person. So how do I show myself as a good leader?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think that that the way you show yourself as a good leader, as the way you showcase yourself for whatever it is that you want to showcase yourself, is by doing what it is. Doing it in a way that other people can see, doing it in a way that's public. So for example, if you perceive yourself to be a leader and you want to go on in life in some way, leading an organization or being a leader, you need to become a leader in whatever kinds of, work towards being a leader in whatever kinds of organizations you're involved in. So for example, now at the Sudbury Valley School, where my own son went, which is a school for self-directed education, people, for example, there are various positions within the school. It runs democratically. And so some people would like to be the chair of the school meeting, and they would run for office as chair of the school meeting. And if they performed well as chair of the school meeting, that's a kind of leadership position. Everybody would be able to see that they are doing a good job as in that position. And so then when it came time if somebody was applying for a job, then you've kind of created a resume. So I was, I think when people don't have a certificate, you don't have grades, then your resume becomes important. This is a statement of the things you've done in your life, the things that you've achieved in your life, the things that, and then you would get letters of recommendation that validate that. So if you have been the chair of some kind of meeting, or you've been elected president of some kind of an organization for young people that you're involved in, that would be on your resume, and there were other people who could vouch for that, who could say that you did a good job doing this. Let's say it's some other area. Let's say that you want to be a writer, you want to write books, then the important thing that you do is you start writing, and you write in a way that becomes somewhat public. You write in a way, you do a blog post, or you do a Substack, or you do something where there's some public exposure to what you're writing. If you want to, whatever it is you want to do, the way you promote yourself in doing it is by doing it and doing it in a way that becomes public. Don't hide it from people. Do it in a way that becomes public so other people can see that you're doing it, and other people can say, this is really interesting. This is really valuable, what this person is doing. So I think one way that I look at this is in the United States, when unschoolers and other people with self-directed education when they do decide to apply to a four-year university because they want to get a bachelor's degree in something, they need to prove themselves to the university in some way. How do they do that? When they don't have grades, they don't have a formal transcript, they don't have the usual things that universities look at in order to decide whether to accept this student or not. What they have to do is two things. They have to present a good essay about why it is they want to go there, a very convincing essay about what they've done, why they want to do this, why they think they're well qualified to do this, and they need to support that with a resume which shows the things that they've done, and then to supplement that with letters of recommendation from people, ideally from professionals in the area that they're interested in, who have looked at what they've done and can vouch for the fact that this person is really doing good work for the age that they are, that this person is very interested in this, and this would be a really good candidate for your program. So I think that the evaluation, I think, for people in self-directed education is a much more real and honest evaluation than simply having grades or some certificate, because we all know that you can get high grades in a regular school without learning very much. You can get high grades just by learning how to pass tests, by learning how to study for the test, and then forgetting it afterwards because you did it and you're not really interested in it, and so on and so forth. So the real world kind of evidence that you've really done these things, that shows that you're really interested in these things, that can be much more powerful evidence than grades in courses or having some kind of a diploma or a certificate.
Yeah, it was really nice to get such a great answer for my question. Srijani, I pass it over to you.
Yeah. So I generally develop my skills in my interest, and also I do work on some skills on myself and social development. So what are the other skills that I can develop in my professional journey?
Okay, again, I'm going to ask you to repeat that. I'm seeing a message that says something about closed captions. Is it possible for me to get closed captions, which might help me? I'm just looking at this. Captions, here we go. Show captions.
Okay.
Okay, this might help. Okay, could you repeat the question again?
Yes. I generally develop on my domain skills, like my skills on my interest. And I also develop myself and social development too. So what are the other skills that I can develop for my professional journey?
Okay, so so you're asking, so you're developing your social self, and you also want to develop other kinds of skills that are important for your professional journey, and you're wondering how to do both of these things. Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's just a matter of doing it. You know, I think it's important. Certainly, a lot of social experience is very important. One of the things that I've learned in research with self-directed education is that many of them believe that many people who have been through self-directed education believe that the most important skills that they have learned are social skills, that the social skills are really important throughout their life, that because they have social skills, they're able to interact with people in a positive way, they're able to work with other people well, they're good at cooperating, they are able to make friends and colleagues, they're able to elicit the support of other people when they need the support of other people. That we are social animals, and the social skills are really very important. And unfortunately, many people who are spending so much time in school have less opportunity to really develop the social skills to the maximum capacity. So I think that that's one of the strengths of self-directed education, is you have lots of time just to socialize with other people. Now, unfortunately, too many people think that that's wasted time. You're just hanging out with other people. You're just spending a lot of time talking with other people. That's not wasted time. That's very valuable time. But on the other hand, you also want to have time, as you're pointing out, to to think about what it is that you uniquely want to do in life, and how is it that you need to prepare yourself beyond the social skills to do that. And again, it's simply a matter of time management. I talked about time management before in relation to online activity. How do you schedule your time? How do you make a plan for yourself? What is it that you really want to do in life? What skills do you need to develop to do that? And make a plan for yourself, and then make a timing plan. We all have this. So, you know, my struggle right now is I want to write another book. I've been saying for several years now, I want to write my next book, but I haven't done it. You know, why not? Why haven't I done it? And it's because I I allow myself to be drawn into a lot of other things that have more immediate deadlines, more immediate pleasures, more immediate rewards, and I'm not scheduling myself the time I need to write that next book. So I'm in some sense lecturing to myself right now that if I want to do that, I've got to simply schedule time to do it. And the same thing applies to everybody. If there are certain things you want to do, but for some reason other things are filling your time, then how do you put some level of brakes on those other things, time away from those other things, when you can focus on the skills or the whatever the project is that you want to do for yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Uncle. That was very insightful. And like we can take another last question from Dhrupad.
Yeah. So my last question is, I personally believe that parents should be somewhat strict with their kids and make them do what they think is right for their child. So what is your opinion on that?
So you think that parents should be more strict with their kids and make the, this is an unusual thought.
Not more strict, but like somewhat strict, not like really strict, but just a little strict, like to guide the child into however they see the child should like grow up to be.
Yes, I understand. I think I do understand the question, and I think that what here's what I guess. Let me talk a little bit in general what I think that parents' roles are. I think that there are some parents who subscribe to unschooling beliefs who carry it too far, in my opinion. I'm not necessarily sure that they're wrong in every case, but I think sometimes they carry it too far. And so, for example, I've heard from parents who believe that it would be wrong for them to insist that their child play a role in household chores. That it would be wrong for them to require their child to help out in maintaining the home, to help out by doing washing dishes, helping to clean the house, doing things around the house, that somehow it would be wrong if they really require their child to do that. I think normally it shouldn't have to be an order. It should be just a discussion. Look, we live in this house where there are certain things that need to be done. How do we divide up the work? What would you think would be your fair share of the work, and to work it out in a kind of democratic way? But I think that one might be spoiling their child if they give the child the impression that you don't really have any responsibility here. Your only responsibility is to yourself, that you also have a responsibility to your family. I think it's important that children grow up with this sense. I do have some responsibility to my family. I have some responsibility to other people. In a democratic school, you've got a responsibility to the other people in the school, a responsibility there. And so it's not all just selfishness. It's not all just doing what it is that you want to do for yourself. It's also thinking about what are my responsibilities to other people, including my responsibilities to my own parents. And I think that parents who give the impression that you have no responsibility to them, I think that's not necessarily a healthy family life. I think that, but on the other hand, I don't think it's proper for your parents to say it's your responsibility to become a doctor because I want you to be a doctor. That's a mistake. That's something you should resist. But if your parents say you have a responsibility to be present at dinner time and be a member of the family, you have a responsibility to show some caring towards us, you have a responsibility that, we've devoted a certain amount of effort towards you. You in return should be devoting a certain amount of effort towards us. That's only fair, right? So I think that that's a way that I would think about it. So But on the other hand, when it comes to the things that, such as your career, such as your education, such as how you spend most of your time, I think that parents have to learn to step back on that. And I think that it's the young person's duty to help the parents understand this, to be kind of sympathetic towards your parents. Your parents maybe grew up in a different world. Your parents have a different sense of what family responsibility is. Your parents maybe even grew up at a time when parents decide who you should marry or what your career should be, or, and that's not the world you're growing up in. That's not the world for yourself. And sometimes it's important. Sometimes the young people have to educate the parents. And that may be hard. That may be hard for the parents to accept. But you have to be patient with your parents. And you have to, and it's part of your job as a young person to help your parents enter this new world where you have a somewhat different relationship to your parents than your parents may have had to their parents.
Yep. Thank you. That was a great answer. And I will now hand it over to Dwiji, uncle, who is going to take questions from the audience.
Thank you, Dhrupad. I'm so sorry, Peter. I have to put my old hag face in front of you after hearing all those young kids share such amazing questions. There have been many questions, and I'm just picking a couple of them. And I'll just share that one question, which I felt I personally am very curious to know your opinion on or share your thoughts on. Many families require parents to work multiple jobs because of their financial situation. And that severely limits the time they can give their kids. And we are just curious to know what has your experience been, especially in your studies of open learning in not so, in disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I haven't had a lot of direct experience with open learning in disadvantaged families, but I do know that one thing that is helpful is when families can get together. Now, I know that you've got a community there, which I would think that would be very helpful. That when families can get together and so that it's not just the parents who are involved with, and this would be especially a problem with the issue with young children. Older children can fare more for themselves. They can get out in the community. They can do things. They can become involved. They don't need so much parental oversight. They don't need parents to be with them all the time beyond a certain age. That age may vary from child to child and from place to place. But for young children, you're right. If your parents are working all the time and you've got young children at home, it's easier to put them into a school than to have them home, because otherwise there's nobody there to watch them. The school is free babysitting, right? That's one of the main reasons that people send their children to school. So what can you do about that? So if families can get together and they can form a situation, maybe there's a grandmother or grandparent who's not working, who can be there. And they can be in that person's house during that period of time, and that person maybe gets paid just a little bit, but it's somebody who likes to do this anyway and who's with the kids and providing an environment for the children to learn. It becomes kind of a little bit of a learning center. During COVID in the United States, there were many people who began homeschooling who hadn't homeschooled before. Some of them have actually continued with homeschooling even beyond COVID. And there were many families that were very poor, economically poor. There were many African American families that had, prior to COVID, there were very few African American homeschoolers. With COVID, there was a great increase in the number of African Americans who were homeschooling, and many of whom were from the kind of family that you're talking about, not having much money. The parents have to work. The parents maybe do have multiple jobs. They're not able to be home with their kids. And they form these little communities because there were a lot of them doing it at that time. And they formed these little communities and started these little schools that were free, or just very little expense, that were just pop-up schools in a sense to serve that purpose. And some of them lasted for a longer period of time. So that's one way of solving the problem. It's not necessarily easy to solve, especially if you're isolated, if you're not in a community of other people who are doing this. But I think it's very important, generally speaking, that people who are homeschoolers, whether they're unschoolers or whether they use a curriculum at home, don't think of it as schooling just at home. I think that even for the best of homes, it's very important that children are involved, not just with their own parents, not just with their own family, that they're involved in some sense with a larger community. Because you need to learn, even if you've got wonderful parents, even if your family is the most wonderful family on earth, you need to learn from other people too. You need to learn simply by being exposed to other people. You need a community of other children. You need to see adults who are different from your own adults, from your own parents. You need to be exposed to a range of different ideas, different ways of living, different ways of being. So regardless of what economic background you're coming from, I think it's very important that somehow for self-directed education, the family arrange that the child is not just within the family, that the child is part of some larger community
Lovely.
of people from which you're learning.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I mean, that's the very basis of our Aarohi learning community. So feels very nice to hear it from in your words. Thank you. Ratnesh, over to you.
Yeah, hi Peter. Hi, I'm Ratnesh. I've been part of Aarohi since its inception about 13 years back, and I've been thoroughly enjoying journey with so many families. So there are a couple of questions. I'm kind of combining them from the audience. One question is that given so many pluses or advantages of open learning, why hasn't it open learning or self-directed learning, why hasn't that become hugely popular? So maybe it's also an indication, how do you see the future as in the next few years or maybe many years? And also somebody is asking, we often hear only the success stories. What about some unsuccessful self-directed learners in that sense? So those are the two questions I'm combining and from audience. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question: why is it not more popular? And I've struggled with that question for a long time. It's something, once you see it and once you see it work, once you get it, it seems obvious. I say, why doesn't everybody get it? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we keep doing what we're doing? Why doesn't everybody understand this? And it's like it's like one of these visual insights. These ambiguous pictures you look at, and some people see the old witch and some people see the beautiful young lady in the picture, that picture I'm talking about. And at first you can only see the old witch and you can't see the beautiful young woman. And then once you see the beautiful young woman, you can only see the beautiful young woman. You wonder why you didn't see the beautiful young woman in that picture before. It's a change in your framework of perception that you now can see what you didn't see before. We have this set way of looking at things. And if you've kind of grown up with a set way of looking at things, where you're judging people based on the old way of perception, and the old way of perception that everybody has grown up with is that children go to school. The first thing, at least in the United States, that you ever ask about a child is what grade are they in school, right? Or who's your favorite teacher? Or, which is a terrible question if you don't have a favorite teacher, right? Or if you, what's your favorite subject? Which is a terrible question if you don't have a favorite subject. Or, you know, everybody wants to know how you're doing in school. Or you know, just like adults, the first thing you ask is, what is your job? What is your career? The first thing that you ask of a child is, what grade are you in school? It's your identity. And so that's part of the problem. You take the child out of school and they no longer have this typical identity. How do you even talk about them if they're not in school? What, you know, you have to change your orientation to what are you interested in? What are you doing? What are you, instead of what grade are you in school? But I also think a big part of it is this. We human beings are, as I said before, we're very social human beings. Part of being social is that we are creatures of social norms. We do what other people do. We couldn't live in human society if we didn't have a very strong tendency to want to do what other people do. That's what makes society cohere. We are not total individuals. As much as we might want to say we're total individuals, none of us are. We are creatures of norms. We do what's normal. Nobody wants to be abnormal, right? And generally speaking, this is a good thing. This is what has allowed us to be social beings. We tend to look around, see what other people are doing, and do what other people are doing. And that's what makes society possible. If we didn't do what other people are doing, we'd all be going off in this way and that way, and there would be no social coherence. There would be no common ground for community because everybody is just into their own thing rather than into some common kind of thing. So, and in some sense, even on a practical level, for your own individual survival, it tends to make sense to do what other people are doing. One way I like to express this is, let's say, you grow up in a community and you see you're living on an island and there's two bridges that go off of that island onto the mainland. There's Bridge A and there's Bridge B. And you notice that everybody, when they want to go off to the mainland for some reason, they take Bridge A. Nobody's taking Bridge B. And then you wonder, why is nobody taking Bridge B? And maybe even you ask and nobody knows. They just all say, well, we just are Bridge A people. We always take Bridge A. You've never heard any good reason why nobody takes Bridge B. Well, are you going to go and take Bridge B? Maybe there's a good reason. Maybe nobody remembers, but maybe there's a good reason nobody takes Bridge B. Maybe there's a terrible troll under Bridge B, or maybe Bridge B is about to collapse. And at one point, everybody knew it would collapse. Nobody remembers that anymore, but nobody's taking Bridge B. You might be taking your life into your hands if you take Bridge B, even though nobody can explain to you why not to take Bridge B. So you're better off taking Bridge A. Why not take Bridge A? Do the thing everybody else is doing. We also have this idea, and it's part of being a human being, that people who don't abide by social norms are kind of crazy. They're kind of wacky in some way. There's something wrong with them. They're abnormal. Why don't they do what other people do? And none of us likes to be stigmatized. So we all want to do what other people do. Now, generally speaking, as I say, this is a good thing, but sometimes it leads to something harmful. So an example that I often like to talk about is back in the days in China, when they bound girls' feet so that their feet wouldn't grow. They were basically crippling all women who are of the upper social class. Peasants didn't get their feet bounded because they were going to have to work in the fields. But if you weren't a peasant, your feet would be bound as a little girl so they didn't grow, which would basically cripple you. And everybody did this to their little girls. Now, there was originally some reason why they were doing it, and it was not a good reason. It was because that made you more marriageable if you were doing it. But then once it became a tradition, you would be violating the tradition if you didn't bind your daughter's feet, even if you believed this was harmful. I think there's a little bit of comparison here between our traditional schools. So we send our children to traditional schools, even though in my mind, we're crippling them by doing that. We're crippling them mentally, we're crippling them psychologically. We are putting them in a situation where they're not developing their full capacities, where they're being limited by the way the school operates. But we do it because everybody else does it. Because why risk doing something differently? Why risk having my child and me, myself, as a parent, be stigmatized as doing something weird, having people point their fingers, this is weird. I think that's one reason people don't make this change. Another way of saying this is that I remember even thinking this myself when my own son, we took my own son out of the regular public school, and he went to the Sudbury Valley School, which was this very strange, unusual school, thinking this: suppose over time my son doesn't develop well. Suppose he turns out that he becomes a criminal, or maybe he has a real mental breakdown. He develops schizophrenia. He develops something terrible happens along the way. If he goes to the regular school and this happens to him, they won't blame me for it. People won't blame me as his parent for it because I did everything everybody else is doing, and yet this thing happened to him. But if I've made this unusual decision about him, I've decided to have him not go to the typical regular school, to go to this unusual school, I worry somebody's going to start pointing their finger to me and say, see, see what happened? You deprived him of the regular education and he became a criminal, or he had this emotional breakdown. Now, these things can happen to anybody. They can happen no matter what you as a parent do. This can happen to anybody. But if you've been different as a parent, if you haven't done what everybody else does, then you might be more likely to be blamed for it than if you had done what everybody else does. My son calls this defensive parenting. And he thinks it's one of the biggest reasons why people don't make a decision for self-directed education. Parents, somewhat understandably, I'm sympathetic with parents who think this way, are protective of themselves. They don't want to do something that's different because they don't want to be blamed if something should go wrong. It's also, I think, why parents are prone to want to emphasize the achievements of their child when their child does something different, and maybe a little bit less willing to accept the child who's just normal, who's just not necessarily excelling, but who's just normal and who's going through life and all the struggles of life that everybody goes through, because they are afraid that they will be blamed that their child isn't being excellent in something if they haven't chosen the typical schooling direction. So I think that's part of the answer. And then of course there's government legal issues. Governments governments don't want to catch up to this, can't catch up to this. There's also huge financial interests in the typical school system. I can speak about the United States. I can't speak about India from direct experience, but in the United States, the whole educational system, this is a huge bureaucracy. and in which there are millions and millions of people making their living this way, and some people making a lot of money this way, running schools, being teachers, publishing textbooks. This whole industry, there's a lot of financial reward for this, for keeping it going. And so the reformers in education want to reform it in a way that there's going to be still more money involved. They want new textbooks because there's now new ways of teaching old subjects. And so new textbooks, they want new education specialists to deal with whatever and the whole psychiatric industry, the whole psychology industry kind of supports what's going on. The drug industry does, pharmacology does, because so instead of saying school isn't working for my child, we say this child has ADHD, or this child has some psychological problem that we can treat with therapy or we can treat with drugs. Well, there are people who make money from that therapy. There are people who make money from those drugs. And so they champion this way of dealing with the problem rather than saying, this is a school problem, let's get the kid out of school. Nobody's making money from that. There's no financial incentive behind some program for promoting kids getting out of school. There's no financial incentive for saying, this could be solved by giving children more time to play, because play is free. Therapy costs money, drugs cost money. There's people who have a financial interest in promoting drugs and promoting therapy and promoting private schooling, let's say, that costs a lot of money, instead of promoting this kind of education that doesn't cost much money or any money at all. So that's those are some of the forces, I think, that prevent people from going in what seems like such a reasonable direction with education. So you'll have to remind me what the second part of your question is, and then I'm going to have to end it, because I do have to end it this time. I'm also beginning to lose my voice, to be honest. So the second part of your question, you remind me what it was.
Actually, you have kind of answered that it was about the unsuccessful not being talked about. And so in a way, you have kind of answered.
Oh, yes, the unsuccessful.
Aparna, you take over.
So I think the question, I think part of the issue is, what does it mean for to be unsuccessful? And so so what is success and what is not success, and how do we evaluate success or not success? I think in my mind, as I said before, the primary index of lack of success would be if the person is not able to make a living, not everybody would even say that's evidence of unsuccess. But I think that in my mind, an education has been successful if the person is able to become an independent adult, ultimately become a person who can support themselves and who becomes a reasonable citizen of the world that they're growing up in, who contributes to the world they've grown up in, gives more to that world rather than takes more from that world than they give. That to me is the measure of success. And how do you even know when it's successful? You don't know when it's successful as it's occurring. You don't know even when it's a young person. When the person dies, you might say, this person was successful. This person gave a lot in life. This person was a great parent. This person contributed to the community. But in some sense, you don't know until they died. So how do you even measure success? And so I think we need to get away a little bit from that. If the young person growing up says, here's when I think you need to listen to it not being successful. If the young person growing up says, this is not successful, this is not working for me, take that seriously. Take that seriously. If that young person is saying, this is not what I want, if this young person says, I want to go to a regular school, let them go to a regular school. I'll tell you, we did a study which was published, maybe you've seen the study of, Gina Riley and I did a study of 75 grown unschoolers in the United States. Of those 75, 3 of them said, I did not want to be an unschooler. I wanted to go to the regular school, and my parents didn't let me do it. They were angry about what happened. They were held at home. They all believed because of their parents being narrow-minded, overly fundamental, religious. They believed their parents were holding them out of school because their parents didn't want them to learn what was being taught in school, not because they thought it would be better for their education. They were all women, and they were all believed that they were being held home because their parents believed that girls don't really have to learn much anyway. And we better to have the kids at home to help the parents. The mom was kind of needed help, and the father was kind of absent in a way. And they were all very angry about it. It turned out they didn't do badly in life anyway. Despite all that, they didn't do badly in life, but they were angry about the fact that they were being held home. And they should not have been held at home. It was wrong for those parents to insist. So I think the biggest evidence that it's not working is if the young person says it's not working. And if the young person has said it's not working, you need to listen to that person. It's not self-directed education if the child doesn't want to be there. So if the child wants something else. And so I think that's the biggest evidence of failure in self-directed education. It's failure if it's not making the child happy, if it's not what that child wants.
Thank you, Peter. That definitely, yeah. Aparna, you want to announce?
So I would like all the participants, I'll request all the participants to answer to a poll which is sent now. It's just a one question poll which you guys can answer.
And I would like to wrap up this session. Sincere apologies, Peter. We took a little more of your time than we had planned, but it was lovely to hear. And also the dynamic of managing each other's accent, understanding each other, and then figuring out the closed captioning. I mean, we also had a third person who turned on closed captioning. It was lovely to see the dynamic play out, because when we talk of learning, we say learning is a lifelong journey. And at every stage, we encounter failures and successes. And like you very well pointed out, only when you stumble can you realize that, you have to step over stones. So, hey, we learned something about Zoom today, that, anybody can turn on closed captioning and the community comes in and helps, solve a problem. So I won't take too much time. Thank you very much, Peter, for a really lovely conversation. I do have a request from all of us here, because there were a bunch of questions that we couldn't take up. Is there some place where we can send them so that you can answer in leisure? And, one of us can follow up with you?
Well, so yeah, you could, if you want to have them send the questions to you, and you could send me an email, that might be the best way to do it. And I don't promise to try to answer all the questions.
That's
Sometimes
fine.
it takes more time than I really feel I can spare, but I would try to address questions that I feel I have some thoughts about, or maybe I could just cite an article that I've written or something that would be relevant to that. And I am glad it took me a while to even figure out how to turn on the captions, but once I turned them on, that was a lifesaver for me. I think part of my growing old, my brain is a little bit older than most of you, all of you, and I have a little bit of cognitive difficulty sometimes. If it's an accent, I have a little bit of a cognitive difficulty interpreting it, understanding it, and I apologize for my difficulty there. But the captions were a lifesaver for me when I finally figured out how to turn it on. So I learned something from that too, that it's possible to turn on captions and be able to see in writing what people are saying. You were clearly saying it enough that the interpreter that turns the chat on could understand it. So,
True.
all right, I do have to go now. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Peter. And thank you, everybody. Please do answer the poll. And we meet every Saturday and on the same channel. and meeting room. And you're welcome to join us for the Saturday meetups. We also have a WhatsApp group and a Telegram group. So you can find all the links on our website, aarohilife.org. Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend. And let's mull over the many things that Peter and all our young learners have shared, because there's a lot of food for thought over there. Thank you.
Yeah,
And do
once
answer the
again,
poll.
Dwiji, I just want
Please.
to once again apologize. There's so many questions. I have a big file copied from all of them. So thank you for all the questions. But as you realize, we unfortunately could not run through all the questions. So we'll collate all the questions. If you still have questions, please send it to us and we will collate all the questions and email to him. And I mean, let's see how much he can respond. So yeah, thank you very much for being patient with our format and style of doing it. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. And please do, the poll will be still open for a few minutes. The poll is more for about future meetups. So it will be really useful for us if you respond to the poll to plan our future meetups, future guests, and so on. So we can try and invite more people, more parents who can give specific inputs to the kind of topics you want to be taken up. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You.
Thank you.